You're listening to Tabletop Arcanum, a podcast dedicated to learning and exploring the hobby of tabletop gaming. Your hosts are Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, so sit back and relax as we talk, discuss, and joke our way through the hobby we love so much. Welcome to Tabletop Arcanum, and welcome to an interview episode. This time we have Teagan Morrison from Hero Forge, so sit back, relax, and have a listen. All right. Well, first off, I want to say thank you and welcome, Teagan, to Tabletop Arcanum. Happy to have you join us for a discussion today.
My pleasure, Justin. I'm really looking forward to talking all about Hero Forge and maybe even unveiling a little bit that our fans don't know about.
Fancy. All right, so that's a teaser for later. Why don't we start at the top, though? Who are you? And give me a little bit of, if someone asks who is Teagan Morrison, what do you tell them?
Well, assuming we're asking that in the context of Hero Forge, once upon a time, a long time ago, even from an early age, I kind of became obsessed with making games and even how games and websites interact. I made my first arcade game when I was 11 and put it on the internet for people to play. That was a very exciting process for me. Later on, I ended up in video games. So I was at a video game company called Naughty Dog for 10 years and worked on a franchise called Uncharted. It's well known, I think, within the video game spheres. And then moved to my own company, Hero Forge, that was just so close to my heart in terms of both an intersection of art and technology on the internet, but also just collaborative storytelling. I'm a huge collaborative storytelling fan, and I really love the people in the community that build around stories and around companies. In this case, when you bring art and tech together, you bring friends along with you to make that art and tech.
Awesome. And then, so what took you from being just the gamer to actually joining that industry? What were those catalyst moments that made you make that jump?
I'll give you some really early years catalyst moments, and that was I asked my mum for an action man. It's the equivalent in America of G.I. Joe. I was like, and this would be 5-6-year-old me. It's like, Mum, can I have an action man? And she said, no, but you can make your own. and sort of pointed me to a bunch of cardboard and paper and scissors, and I was like, oh, I did. I made a fully kind of articulating action man that I colored in with pens and played with that while other kids were playing with their store-bought. And I think that's a good microcosm of my childhood in terms of just the difference between making a thing and playing a thing. There's always no difference at all. They were the same thing. If I tried a puzzle, I had to go immediately start making puzzles. It's been like that, I think, my whole life. So at no point did the transition happen because it was always happening.
That's awesome. And oh man, the microcosm of the idea of a 6-year-old Teagan is pretty much your mom pretty much told you to make Hero Forge in that moment.
You're right, even all the way back then. And it turns out that papercraft, making things out of papercraft and polygons, is nowhere near as different as you'd imagine.
It's just add a dimension, and that's all you gotta do, right?
I mean, the papercraft was 3 dimensions already.
Oh, there you go.
Polygons are 1-dimensional until you start adding them together.
There's the magic.
Yeah, that's the magic.
And that kind of leads into my next question then. So, since you've been in the video game industry and now are in the tabletop gaming industry, what similarities have you found that join those two industries? And then maybe highlight some of those things that are not so similar either.
Sure. I mean, on a sort of a face value, Hero Forge is very much like a video game character creator. The start of any AAA video game might give you a character creator similar, perhaps not as in depth, but in the end result, you're ending up with a character that you're playing with in your imagination for Hero Forge, or at least a token to represent that imagination. So certainly a lot of overlap. There's an interesting kind of comparison between the fan bases that I have in that both video games, in working on Uncharted and with Hero Forge, just the fans and the consumers of those products were just so ferociously in love with what we were making. But in tabletop RPGs, the start of the thing they're in love with is in their imagination. Like their character, they came up with it. the bar that we have to hit to match that imagination is just there's no end to it. And it's just so gratifying to work with a fan base that loves what they're creating with your tools that much. And we realized at some point a few years in that there would never ever be an end to the features and additions and tools that we can add to Hero Forge, because the bar is people's imagination.
Mm-hmm. And then one thing I always like talking about is, what games have you been playing lately?
I do love, like I said, collaborative storytelling. I had the absolute pleasure of being in a game that our marketing director Fox ran over the last couple of years. With the pandemic, they started kind of a remote game, and they've been writing books in these worlds that they're running this game in. So I got the treat of being in the most detailed and richly kind of like just sink into the minutiae of the world gaming experience that I think I've ever had. That was so far removed from kind of a regular module of D&D. It wasn't even the D&D system. It was just, it was spectacular. And then me personally, I love introducing people to D&D. I love it. I've introduced upwards of 100 people to D&D at this point, and my vow, the sort of my tenant here, is always finish the arc.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone's first D&D experience usually is, oh, we played for like 3 or 4 months, and then there was a breakup within the group, and then it never finished. So I think successfully finished a whole story arc with more than 100 people at this point.
That's definitely the impressive part. Yeah, like you said, it's always something that happens, whether it's a social dynamic breakdown or just scheduling conflicts or what have you.
Oh, always. And I don't have a perfect record, I'll admit, but I do pride myself in giving people a complete first-time D&D experience.
We had talked a little bit prior. You actually had mentioned something about a wizard with a printing error. So, like, I want to know the story.
I gotta tell you this one. So I'd run these in-person games with 4 other friends. Basically, I collect friends who haven't tried D&D, and whenever someone's like, "I haven't tried any collaborative storytelling," to me, that's like if you told me you'd never seen a movie. Like, imagine how excited I would be for you to see a movie. That's how I feel, and how I end up collecting these friends together. I'm like, you gotta try it. A friend, Kelly, in this case, was playing a wizard, and because I work for Hero Forge at Hero Forge, of course I'm printing everybody's miniatures. This was our Hero Forge test printer, so not the ones we use commercially, but just for these test prints, just to see how it goes. So I kicked off this batch. It was ready to go the second the players arrived. So we're unscrewing these miniatures as players are arriving, and poor Kelly's wizard had a printing error. So we're talking sliced in half, right up across the torso at a diagonal.
Ooh.
And a beautiful part of collaborative storytelling is that element of randomness that tempers the power of the player versus the GM. And in this case, it's like, I'm so sorry, Kelly. Your wizard has had a terrible accident involving magic, and the top half of their torso is invisible. And I knew Kelly at this point. I knew that she was going to be very excited to play that character. And she's like, oh no, I guess that's just how I'm going to have to go about the world. And she just fantastically role-played this wizard that had an invisible upper half through the entire game that we ran. And it just had a blast, like leaning in to the randomness in this case that was produced by a printing error.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. All right, Teagan, let's then pivot a little bit and move a little bit more into Hero Forge itself then.
Sure.
Why don't you give me the origin of Hero Forge?
Well, Christmas is almost coming up, so it's only appropriate that the story of Hero Forge is a Christmas story.
Perfect.
It was a group of friends, mostly housemates, who were living in the community house that I run. Love fostering community in all the different ways. But one of my best friends, Josh, was playing in a game with another good friend. We were all playing for the first time. We'd never played before. And he was like, for Christmas, I want to get everybody their first miniatures. And he really took a very active role in helping us find those miniatures. He was like, how about this one? What about this one? In this case, I was playing something like, it was my first character too. It was something weird, like Orc Cleric. It was very difficult to find these miniatures. And we went back and forth for a while. I ended up I used to be into miniatures back in the day, like Warhammer. I ended up kind of kit bashing one together. So I bought a couple of miniatures, had Josh buy me for Christmas a few miniatures, and I sliced some weapons apart and glued them on and painted and sort of created a full miniature for the first time in a decade. And I think immediately that miniature broke because you're gluing tiny things together. And that experience of not having been able to match my imagination in any way really stuck with me. Josh and I were having a conversation, and the idea of like, what if we did like a kind of a Kickstarter where we sent people pieces of miniatures and they could kind of glue them together, was sort of the very first seed that Josh was like, I wanted to get you guys this, but it didn't exist. What if we did this? And that was the very first kind of spark of like, oh, well, maybe we can do something even more advanced. Can we have like a character creator, and we can use this new technology that barely been on the scene for more than a couple of years at this point. It really just started to come into its own. I remember those first test prints where we were just sort of like, is this a thing? Getting them in the mail and seeing this rough out of a character that was real, that was tangible, that just being so thrilled that the fingers were like individually visible. And we did a bunch of, even at that stage, we were doing all these kind of thickness tests, and was this even possible? And when the answer came back as, yeah, we think it might be, we started to take it pretty seriously. And over Christmas break, like this little ragtag group of friends put together a Kickstarter that honestly back then was just, it was all smoke and mirrors. As soon as I knew it was possible, I tested it to the point that I knew we could really do this. And then we just needed to show what it might be like, if you imagined it. The demo on the original Kickstarter that was showing a character being made in a browser, like it really was in a browser. If I'd clicked one thing even slightly wrong, it would have crashed.
Fair.
But I knew it was possible. I was very confident we could do it at that point. So it's like, this is what we want to make. Please help us. And
Hero Forge has been around long enough for that was like the magic of a Kickstarter at the time. Was like, I have this crazy idea. Can you help me make it a reality?
That it really was. It was a very earnest ask from like a small group of friends to like just the crowds out there who wanted the same thing as we did. They said, yes, we can. Here, do this thing, go make this thing. And we said, well, gosh, I guess we really will now.
And like you hit the perfect thing with the origin story of like how many times, like I've been a gamer for 30 years now. How many times it was like, okay, this is a mini, this is my options. Like, this is close enough, I guess. And you just settle for good enough. And
well, apparently for me, one time is all it took.
Right. Well, everyone gets to that spot in a different spot, but like,
but I was lucky that the time was ripe to make this right, to make a change so it wouldn't have to happen again.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, it's so awesome to see like you found a need instantly. Like, well, yeah, there's creative people who can do really amazing kit bashing. That's a learned skill that not everybody has the time or patience for.
Yeah, that's the hope, is making that your imagination is becoming real, like accessible to everyone. And we really did hit onto a need. And I'd give that recommendation to anyone who's thinking about creating something, is if you want it to exist, chances are there's going to be a lot of other people out there who want it to exist too.
That is very true. My next question kind of leans into like, what are the core values of Hero Forge? And like, we kind of talked a little bit about it as more of maybe a company angle, but also, Hero Forge is a product line and things like that, have its own sets of values. So however you want to address that, go for it.
Fair enough. Yeah, let's dig in. And a lot of them are born in our origin story there. In that you start a company with friends. To be fair, we grew up with nearly exclusively people we knew or had connections to for so many years, because when we asked ourselves, who do we know, or how are we going to find the best person for this role, the answer nearly always ended up, wait, we know that person over there. They're a friend of ours, because LA is just filled with creatives and programmers, etc. Creating a company of friends, we have tried to maintain the healthiest culture that we can when it comes to work-life balance and benefits. So I remember when we were at a stage with the company a few years in, we started to get stable in terms of income through the site. We started paying for everyone's health insurance fully. And I remember like a friend just sort of tearing up and being like, this is the kind of company I want to work for, where it's about us, it's about the best life that we can live. And that was really beautiful to just kind of take that approach. And to build our best lives together, making a thing we love.
Yeah, right.
We've
Why
taken
not?
every opportunity like that we can. We have a few other kind of core tenets there that we've had from the start. I've got a wild diversity of friends and diversity of people who work within the company now as a result. And the character creators that we saw out there were not as representative and as inclusive as we wanted them to be. For example, one of the things we did right from the beginning was gender on Hero Forge is analog. Like it's not a binary. In fact, it's richer than analog. It doesn't say you're going to be into one of these two boxes. We very deliberately made things sliders, opened those options to all sorts of just mix and match to try to represent just the beautiful rainbow array of humans in real life. And then just Hero Forge in general is like, we love melding art and tech together to create like these really easy to use tools. I love that intersection of computer science, art, and design. And then, oh geez, our advanced users though, the power of the tools, if you keep digging through menus and you become an expert at Hero Forge, our users post things that we don't know how they made anymore. Like we look at that and we're like, I have no idea. We didn't account for this. We didn't provide any of the pieces to make that work. Yet somehow you have this character that's completely unrecognized, even from, it might be even a non-human thing. We're talking spaceships and inanimate objects. It's wild.
Well, and isn't it like a great hallmark of like you built something and it's now just evolved into whatever it is, and you don't even know where the user's coming from to even start that point. But
absolutely, the more power we give the users, the more they surprise us. So like as like hungry for features as users are, we're equally as hungry to see the wild things they come up with them. And I'll talk about some of them later. We got some tools in the works that are just, we're talking handcuffs off, box blown wide open, that we are, Pandora's box is just exploding across Hero Forge in the future. I'm slightly terrified at the problem space we'll be working in.
Oh, we'll get to that in a moment. We've talked about how Hero Forge was initially like this brainchild, and like, hey, let's build a Kickstarter, and you even said like it's all smoke and mirrors. So like Project 1, Campaign 1, the origin and start of Hero Forge, and then now you've gone through a second iteration of Hero Forge 2.0. There's obviously a huge gap of knowledge gained and a huge different approach. So talk me through how you approach 2.0 from the like lessons learned and everything you got out of the original launch.
What
project.
an incredibly like contrasted set of projects to compare. Hero Forge 1 was a small group of friends just testing an idea. Like they wanted to see a thing exist. It was over Christmas break. We all had full-time jobs for the most part. We kind of just did this because out of just love for the possibility. And it was all scrapped together. We didn't have a marketing guy at that point. We were missing team members. We had to beg friends to contribute. It was all put together the best we could under the circumstances. I'd never done marketing before. I had to go online and figure that out and start advertising for it, for example. And it was a beautiful learning process for sure, but we had no idea if that was going to work. We just wanted to see. Flash forward, I guess, six years later, and we've got a 25-person team. Kickstarter initial round was enough to sort of propel us into the snowballing and growing and growing. Thank you so much for everybody who took a risk on just a group of friends who had an idea. Like it tears me up almost to think that people saw that and said, we're with you. We're on board. Let's make this thing. Like you guys haven't, you're a new team, you haven't made anything before, but your idea is exciting enough to us and we want to see it exist. So flash forward all those years later and we're doing 2.0, and we just cannot believe how cool color tech is. Like we have been printing out color minis for many, many years secretly with a bunch of different printers all the time. Every time one comes in, we're like, let's look, we'll unpackage it with excitement. And we're like, no, it's not there yet. It needs to be there. This color Kickstarter was that kind of moment. If it's here, it's ready to go onto a tabletop. These minis look beautiful on a tabletop. And we have a full team of just expertise behind this whole Kickstarter. It was a really, really exciting one. Like it felt like we were coming into our own as like kind of a company, and our technology for 2.0 was so underway and we had so much faith in it. It wasn't strung together. Our 2.0 Kickstarter was like, we're showing you real developed tech that's been like hardly tested. I mean, we had a long way to go. Oh my gosh, was it difficult to implement the color features that we promised? But in terms of the like, it wasn't like a kernel. It wasn't a mustard seed. It was a snowball, only getting bigger. Wow, mixed metaphors there.
It's all right.
So yeah, big shift.
I guess that leads us to our final segment here of like, what is next? What are some of those newest and latest additions that you've put into Hero Forge recently? Where's the next step?
I'm so excited to talk about this. It's taking everything not to just gush and list off way too many features that can make no sense. So
we'll piecemeal it out. It's okay.
I'm going to take a deep breath and say, one, we had a lot of promises in the 2.0 Kickstarter. We blew through stretch goals at a rate we weren't anticipating and had to kind of scramble and sort of take some of our pie in the sky dream ideas and stick them on that list. And we're like, we'll do that. We'll add a face customizer. And there's a few left to hit. Like our priority is kind of meeting those promises. And the last ones to hit are the one little line of stretch goal and a Kickstarter, but they are entirely new explosions of possibilities and incredibly in-depth R&D projects. Face customizer is one of them. Wildly excited to say that our face customizer is shaping up to be the best face customizer, the most like in-depth in all video games. I have never seen a face customizer that can do what ours can do. And that is just, I mean, I can hardly believe it. Every time our team shows an update, I'm like, we can do that? So I can't wait to unveil that. It's going to be wild. Suddenly, like, not just your whole miniatures setup, your getup, your outfit, your items that you're holding are going to be real, but how you imagine your character's face to look, and all of the storytelling and expressiveness that comes with that. The face customizer alone is more in depth, more technically advanced than the entirety of the first Hero Forge. And that was just one stretch goal on the Kickstarter. So cannot wait for that. Just to list off a few other things that we've got in the works. For the Kickstarter, we'll be adding clothing patterns, but and this was one of our kind of biggest sadnesses for the Kickstarter, was that we didn't hit the clothing layering stretch goal. People wanted to be able to mix and match overcoats and undercoats and really kind of make those big impact combinations.
So like I'm wearing like a chain shirt, but then I have like a trench coat over it sort of deal.
Absolutely. And we were kind of as heartbroken as everyone else that we didn't hit it. But a couple of things happened. One, the kind of the after sales for the Kickstarter took us over that stretch goal behind the scenes. And on top of that, we realized we want to be everything that people want us to be. Like we can't just pass up a new thing that people really, really want that we want. We can't at all. And the longer we go passing that up, the harder it will be to add retroactively. Super excited to do layered clothing. And once that's out, we'll be able to add clothing patterns on top of that. And then the other one, just a little stretch goal of the Kickstarter, was more mounts. We've already got some mounts. It'll be easy to add a couple more. Why not? And of course, like in classic Hero Forge style, where we start digging in and we end up looking to the maximum kind of impact that we can have with crazy, crazy tools. We are now developing a fully fledged monster maker. So if you want to make your strange badger that has like wings and a scorpion tail and it's its own mini, go for it. So we're kind of exploding the problem space and creating a system to last us into the forever in terms of what you can make.
Right, at that point, it's just adding bits and bobs to it until, your users come back and go, what is that?
Pretty much. I mean, until we come back and look at what the users make and say,
Mhm.
what is that? How did they do that? I mean, and also just works of art at this point with
Mhm.
the lighting effects that users can add and the way that they can pose things. There's just gorgeous pieces of work, and the new tools we're working on will make that way more possible. It's so just viscerally beautiful to see what users come up with.
So that's like the next steps of what I guess we can call 2.0. What is the dream to hit 3.0? What in your brain, like what is that next, like Hero Forge 1.0 is this, 2.0 is this. What's the next elevation?
Well, if we're going to really keep projecting forward as far as we can, at that point, you're talking 3D printers that are layering atom by atom, like specific atom, specific molecule by specific molecule, and 3D printing entirely sentient, alive, tiny figures that will battle for your pleasure on the
There we go.
tabletop.
You just have to tell it to walk 5 feet forward and it does it.
Absolutely. There you go. That's the ultimate conclusion, really, of 3D printing. Star Trek replicators creating tiny sentient life.
Right.
But that is a great question. In general, our roadmap is adding more tools to Hero Forge. It's agonizing to see a user who has some very specific, unique thing that's about their character and they can't express that. We're like, we want you to express that as badly as you do. We're kind of, like I said earlier, we're kind of taking the cuffs off. Hero Forge has been a very, hey, if it's not printable, we're not going to let you do it. There are tools we're adding that we're working on that just let you go wild, let you scale anything any way you like, create any weird proportions, move anything anywhere you want, add anything to any location. Really advanced tools that make it far more akin to a professional 3D software package than a miniature creator. And while it might not be for everybody in terms of its complexity, the users who really want a thing will be able to make these things happen. On top of that, we're working on ecosystems for sharing. Someone makes something amazing, they'll be able to share it to a library, you'll be able to search that library. We're very excited for that just library of creations being so accessible. Hopefully, like that all kind of culminates in being able to handle just anything people can imagine. That's our goal. If you can imagine it, you can make it with Hero Forge. The other advancements, the other kind of 3.0 advancements come more in the form of how you can use Hero Forge. We're working with Tailspire and numerous other virtual tabletops right now to create Hero Forge integration. We want you to be able to buy a Hero Forge Mini and take it to any tabletop out there. And I think that's going to be very, very powerful.
Well, Teagan, that's everything I had for us today. So I want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. It's been great talking with you. And I cannot wait to see what Hero Forge has next and to essentially play with it myself, because I was blown away with 1.0 back recently with 2.0 and like saw the new tools and went, holy heck. It's a whole new game, and
only
it's
just
amazing,
like
to
tip
see.
of the iceberg. Tip
Right.
of the iceberg when it comes to what we're adding to Hero Forge, and
Mhm.
wildly exciting about this. Justin, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting. I hope my enthusiasm for what we're working on came across appropriately. And me personally, I cannot wait to see what you and the other Hero Forge creators come up with.
Well, thank you, and we'll hopefully not scare your team too much when we with what you see.
I mean, the more you scare us, I think the better. The more excited we are by, like, we share the how did we do this, how did they do this minis with the whole team every time we see one, because it's a
Perfect.
delight to be surprised. So can't wait. Thank you so much.
And welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that discussion, had some laughs, got some insights into what Hero Forge is all about, and I hope you have a deeper understanding of Hero Forge and goings-ons there within. As always, thank you for listening. This has been Tabletop Arcanum. Make sure to follow us on the social medias of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, get those notifications so you find out when new content drops. As always, happy gaming. You've been listening to Tabletop Arcanum, produced by Justin Taylor. This episode is hosted by Justin Taylor. Mixing and editing by Richard Geese. Original theme by Paul Moore and Issac Gilbert. Check the description for this episode's featured background music. You can follow us on most social media platforms. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow, and leave us a review if you would. As always, thanks for listening.